Jane Austen was born in 1775 in Hampshire, England, and lived there with her family until her death in 1817. As a young girl, Jane always loved reading and began writing at a very young age. Pride and Prejudice was her second novel to be published in 1813 following Sense and Sensibility. Her fame as an author grew following those works and ones to follow. Jane Austen's writing career as a young woman took place in the Georgian era in England, where a few notable transitions were occurring. First, the French Revolution had just been fought, and Napoleon rose to power and had conquered much of Western Europe. Secondly, the Industrial Revolution was dawning, and with that, England saw a shift from Enlightenment principles to more romantic ideas that included the first whispers of feminism. Pride and Prejudice is set in the English countryside just outside of London, where the wealthy live on estates and the main characters of our novel find their residence. The iconic opening line of Pride and Prejudice appropriately sets the tone for the novel and its central theme. Austen begins her work by saying, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." The novel explores the lives of the Bennet family and their surrounding neighbors as Mrs. Bennet attempts to see her daughters marry well. The events in the novel are often seen through the lens of Elizabeth, the second eldest Bennet daughter, who boldly explores her views of marriage and civility that differ from the societal norm. The novel follows Elizabeth's eventual journey to love and her indignation with class distinctions. One of the main protagonists, Elizabeth, is an intelligent young woman who has no problem expressing her opinions and standing firm in what she believes. She catches the attention of many admirers, including Mr. Darcy, who she ends up marrying. Mr. Darcy is the male protagonist of the novel, who is first introduced as a rude, arrogant friend of Mr. Bingley's. When she first meets him, Elizabeth wants nothing to do with him. However, when she truly sees who he is, she falls in love with who he proves himself to be. In the end, her family comes around to admiring him as well, and the false pretense under which everyone judged him vanishes. Lydia is one of the younger Bennet daughters who brings disgrace upon the entire family because she elopes with Mr. Wickham, an irrational man with no fortune. Jane is the oldest Bennet daughter who is described as kind and gentle. She marries Mr. Bingley, a very respectable man in the neighborhood, and she's an important confidant of Elizabeth throughout the novel. A well-respected, wealthy man who moves into the neighborhood where the Bennets live. He draws the attention of many mothers seeking to marry their daughters well, and luckily for the Bennets, he chooses Jane to be his wife. Charlotte is Elizabeth's best friend, and is significant because she represents the mindset of many young women that Elizabeth is surrounded by. She marries for wealth and a secure future that is not founded in love. Elizabeth often wonders at how she can truly be happy, and then comes to realize that she has different dreams and desires than herself. Her only goal in life seems to be getting her daughters married. Mr. Bennet is humored by his wife and generally stays out of her affairs. He takes a special interest in Elizabeth, describing her as more intelligent than his other daughters. Lady Catherine de Bourgh is the antagonist of the novel, who, as an aunt of Mr. Darcy, wants to see him married to a woman of more class and wealth than Elizabeth. She tries to prevent their marriage and constantly looks down upon everyone below her. She represents the cultural expectations that Elizabeth constantly fights against. Class distinction is an important theme throughout the novel. Each time one of the Bennet daughters looks to get married, her parents and influential members of society bring up the wealth of the man who she's looking to marry, and how that will impact her future. Wealth is clearly a dividing factor in the novel and is one that Elizabeth disregards in her search to love. This view clearly counteracts the firmly held beliefs of society and how a woman should choose who she marries. There are hints of feminism throughout the novel, such as Elizabeth's bold actions toward male characters and her ability to speak her mind. She bluntly refuses several marriage proposals and acts out of passion rather than with composition, indignity in the way in which her mother wants her to. Though I don't believe this to be a feminist novel per se, there are hints of a change happening in Elizabeth's own spirit that reflect the societal change happening in England during this time. Austen diverts from the typical hero-style novel by merging the roles of villain and hero through Mr. Darcy's character. Mr. Darcy begins the novel as Elizabeth's villain by splitting up her sister and Mr. Bingley and acting rudely toward Elizabeth and her family and honestly everyone he encounters. Toward the end of the novel, the truth behind Darcy's actions is revealed and Elizabeth comes to love him, thus making him the hero in the story. Elizabeth's bold refusal of Mr. Collins' proposal is groundbreaking for the time period in which the novel is set. Elizabeth turned down a life of wealth and material security because she wanted love in a marriage, a concept that we can see through her descriptions of other marriages around her is so foreign for the time. Even her own parents married for superficial reasons that's later revealed in the novel, and didn't marry for love. In the chapters leading up to this scene, Elizabeth and Darcy have worked out their relationship and they've decided to get married. Elizabeth is happy with the arrangement, but is taken aback when Lady Catherine de Bourgh comes to visit unexpectedly. Elizabeth can only imagine what her visit is about. They go on to have a conversation in which Lady Catherine advises Elizabeth against marrying Darcy. The engagement between them is of a peculiar kind. From their infancy, they have been intended for each other. It was the favorite wish of his mother as well as of hers. While in their cradles, we planned the union, and now, at the moment when the wishes of both sisters would be accomplished in their marriage, to be prevented by a young woman of inferior birth, of no importance in the world, and wholly unallied to the family? Are you lost to every feeling of propriety and delicacy? Have you not heard me say that from his earliest hours he was destined for his cousin? Yes, and I had heard it before. But what is that to me? If there is no other objection to my marrying your nephew, I shall certainly not be kept from it by knowing that his mother and aunt wished him to marry Miss de Bourgh. If Mr. Darcy is neither by honor nor inclination confined to his cousin, why is he not to make another choice? And if I am that choice, why may not I accept him? This passage is significant because it illustrates the heart of the societal issues that Elizabeth has to fight against. Her quest for finding love is hindered by the idea that wealth and status matter and are what truly bring happiness in a marriage. Austen's writing style is clearly displayed in the elegant language in this selection and her ability to depict strong characters such as Elizabeth and Lady Catherine. In her criticism of the feminist hints in Pride and Prejudice, Olive Reed analyzes Austen's portrayal of various female characters and the role that privacy and personal space play in giving them independence. The personalities of Austen's female characters vary greatly, with the intelligent ones, Elizabeth and Charlotte, standing out from the rest because of their demand for privacy and personal space from the males in the novel. Charlotte accomplishes this by demanding her own room when she goes to live with Mr. Collins, even though she could live in a much nicer room with him. The same behavior is shown through Elizabeth's refusal of Mr. Collins' proposal and her acceptance of Mr. Darcy's. After Mr. Collins proposes to Elizabeth and she refuses him, he constantly invades her personal space, whether that be mental or physical. Darcy, on the other hand, is aloof and gives her room to process what she feels. This gives her autonomy, which ultimately creates that freedom that Elizabeth has been so desiring. Austen enforces the idea that women need space to be independent and creative by giving the examples of Elizabeth and Charlotte in Pride and Prejudice. In doing this, she creates a radical picture of a woman that differs from that of the time and the culture of literature when this novel was written. I would highly recommend that everyone read Jane Austen's work, and in particular Pride and Prejudice. Jane Austen has an extremely captivating way of writing that brings wit and emotion into the pages and just draws the reader into the story. Additionally, the language used in Austen's work give it depth and relevance many generations after it was written. Austen successfully gives insight into the issues underlying the seemingly perfect, wealthy society in England during the 18th century. The issues plaguing society at this time, such as class distinctions, views on marriage, and how much independence a woman should have, all surface in this engaging work of literature. This novel is suited for readers of any age who want to explore the raw side of wealthy English society and connect with a young woman who is just trying to find her place within it. For younger readers who are exploring their own ideas on life, the future, and marriage, just as Elizabeth is in the novel, her character can serve as an example of how to boldly pave your own way while still maintaining the grace and respect of your family. Elizabeth certainly acts according to her own desires in the novel, but she still considers the thoughts and feelings of her parents and sisters and even those around her in society.